Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board Podcast, where we bring in experts from the industry to try to help educate you from some of their hard knocks and their experience to help you avoid the same mistakes. I've got with me Brandon Clifford today. He is the COO of BAI, Business Alliance Inc. If you don't know who they are, I don't know what rock you've been under, but Brandon, if you don't mind me being a little flattering here for a minute, but I'd love to share a little bit about you with everyone so they know why you're here, and then we'll give you a chance to tell us a bit about you and BAI. But Brandon's been an entrepreneur first, and that which kind of led him into franchise. He started a couple of restaurants right out of college, ended up then being a consultant through BAI for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Got pulled over to the franchisor side where he led FranDev and franchise ops for several years with Homewell Caregivers, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's now then he got recruited back over in the executive team at BAI to help now kind of bridge the gap, train brokers, train franchisors, kind of pull this world together. Perfect role for you, man. So what did I forget? Oh, a couple of kids, got 4 kids, loves being outside, and is volunteers on a couple of nonprofits on their boards. So great guy all around. But tell us more about you. Tell us about BAI, Brandon.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah. So I've been with Business Alliance now for a year here officially, but my tenure goes back a lot further. Like you said, it's like kind of where it all started. And it's funny, Business Alliance has been around for 30 years, and we joke about how it's like everything in franchising started from BAI. It's like you see these people who started different brands, different networks, different things in the franchise space, different technology, whatever. Oh, they used to be a BAI broker. It's like, BAI has been around forever. So, but no, I'm excited to be a part of it. It is a good fit right now. Like you mentioned, I got my start in franchising after, being an entrepreneur out of school. I owned a few restaurants, sold those, and transitioned out. I was kind of considering actually investing in a franchise, and then became a franchise broker. It was fun. It was a good fit for a long time. I really liked inspiring people to kind of bet on themselves and take the leap into entrepreneurship via franchising. And through that, developed some good relationships with a few different brands and got recruited by one. It's actually Homewell Care Services. I know you can't edit this, Dave, so
I will forever be the fool on that one. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. Mike and the team over there, they might get mad at you, but no, I know he's a listener. Shout out to Mike Condon over at Homewell. But yeah, I spent 4 years at Homewell. It was awesome. I loved it. Loved that brand. Loved that team. It was really hard to leave, but it's funny. Natalie Barnes, our CEO here at Business Alliance Inc., she and I have always been very close. She was a mentor of mine when I first got started in franchising, and we had a conversation when I left BAI. As I was kind of closing up my shop as an independent broker because Homewell was recruiting me. She pushed me to do it, and she was like, and I was a President Circle member. I was like one of her top brokers, and she was like, "No, Brandon, you should go do this. It's a good opportunity for you to get kind of like a global perspective on FranDev." Work on the other side of the fence for a little while, and she's like, "But trust me, there'll be a time where you're going to come back to Business Alliance. I have a feeling, maybe even in a different capacity." She's like, "Perhaps even sitting in my seat." I remember those words, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And we kept in touch over the years, and yeah, it just seemed like I really committed to Homewell and really loved that company. And we were in the senior care space, so we were making a difference in the lives of elderly as well. And it's a really good network, a really good model. But every brand needs a different leader for a different time. And when I started, we had 25, 30 owners, something like that. It was really good for my entrepreneurial juices to kind of build something. I think we had like 12 or 15 employees at corporate at the time. 4 years later, we were approaching 100 unique owners, I think 80 or so. We had 30 employees at corporate, so we built the team, built the network. It was no longer quite as the ship had been built. Now someone just needed to sail it. So I had an honest conversation with the team there, and left on really good terms, and found some new captains to that ship and helped set them up. And I'm excited to see that that's still sailing really strong, and they're growing, utilizing Business Alliance this year. I think we've done 11 deals with them this year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all good. And that's the thing about franchising that's really cool, is it's like this little family. It's a big industry, 7,000 brands, or plus, right now, but very small family, right?
Yeah, it's surprisingly small, small for as big as it seems sometimes. Well, Brandon, let's jump in. So guys, I hear, one of the reasons why I started this podcast in the first place was I kept hearing really bad ideas being perpetuated with emerging and established brands. And I kept seeing lack of insights, lack of data, lack of real training. And so people were just kind of doing what everybody else told them to do, or they were guessing, or they're trying to do something that's been done in some other industry and it wasn't going well. So what we want to talk about today is brokers. Like, how do you, as a franchise brand, properly engage brokers so that you can increase your franchise sales? Because sometimes broker deals get a bad rap, or they just want a commission. Well, I got to be honest with you. Like, I work with hundreds of them, and I know it's not the world that they live in. They're trying to help people get into entrepreneurship. They're working their butts off, spending their own money, trying to generate leads, and then find the right match of the right brand to take care of that lead. It's pretty emotional for a lot of them. So I'd like to see what we can do to help eradicate some of that stigma, and also educate people so they know how to engage better. So that's why Brandon's here. I don't know of anyone who's better qualified to have this conversation. So Brandon, tell us a little bit about the landscape, right? This franchise development landscape within the where it overlaps with brokers has been shifting around a little bit the last few years. What have you seen changing in that world?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a definitely a hot button, and it's an interesting topic. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, if you want to fit brokers into your strategy for FranDev, it has to do just that, has to fit in, right? And this might sound a little counterintuitive because I lead a broker, network, right? And but we're a franchise professional networks first and foremost, so brokers, brands, and suppliers, those are all our constituents, and our goal is to be the premier resource of growth for all of them, right? But yeah, ultimately we want brands to use brokers, but it has to be the right fit on both sides. But I would encourage franchisors to take a step back and like think about what is your franchise recruitment process, and what's the goal, what's the outcome that you're looking for. For most people, they might say, and again, this goes back to bad ideas, right? They might say, oh, my goal is to find a franchisee. Well, if that's your goal, that's a very transactional relationship, right? Your goal is to close a deal, right? It's to find get a unit, whatever it might be. What it should be is to find a top performing franchise partner for 10 plus years, right? Like you have to look at like, this is a relationship that you're building, and what better way to build a relationship, to form a business partnership, which a franchise borderlines on that. I know attorneys out there will say, don't use the word partnership, but like, let's look at it like they own a piece of your business, your IP for 10 years with a 10-year renewal. It's a marriage, it's like a ring on your finger, right? And so what's better, getting a personal referral, someone who's a known commodity that fits your persona, has the pain, has the purpose, all the things that you're looking for, or just some sort of a web lead off the internet, right? And but again, it's got to be a piece of your strategy, and if it's not executed properly, it's going to cause frustrations, right? So yeah, I don't know if that's just like a tip of the iceberg. I don't know how much further you want to get into this stuff, Dave.
No. Well, there's a lot, because there was a period of time where everyone was like, hey, we got to use brokers, the broker landscape has changed, right? Like the brokers themselves have changed the way that they do business a little bit, right? It's getting a little bit more competitive in some regards. That's what I observe. Or meaning it might be harder for brands to know, like, well, do I work with all of them or one of them? Or, there are all these questions that are happening. And I see the market just kind of shifting around that. But that's actually a really good question for you. Like, when you were now, put your hat back on from like being FranDev guy in-house at a franchisor, what led you to did you work with multiple franchise broker groups when you were there?
So when I was at Homewell, we did, but I actually I cut it down. When I first started with Homewell, they were very heavy on brokers. Okay, they were part of, I think, 4 networks at the time. They only had 2 FranDev people in the FranDev department, no senior leader, no VP, and they were part of 4 networks. And that was really their only strategy, right? And the thing is if they weren't getting enough attention from the broker groups, like I remember the month before I started with Homewell, I was looking at like lead data. They generated like 28 leads or something like that. And the whole, and that include brokers, websites, everything, right? When I left 4 years later, we were generating like 700 a month across the board. So yeah, you want to be diversified in your lead flow. So if you're too all in with brokers and that's all you rely on, you have no independent lead gen. I mean, it's just, you need to be diversified, right? That's sales 101, right? So, but ultimately, I think you want to understand that you have to have the manpower to cultivate the referrals that you really want, right? Because if all you're doing is looking for leads, if you just say you want leads, leads are what you're going to get, and you're going to get brokers doing all the bad things you hear, just forwarding you a lead form, you're going to get a forward from franchisegator.com that says Dave Hansen, Salt Lake City, 100K investment, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, call this guy. Like that's the kind of referral you get. But if you're looking for referrals and you have a dedicated person that's doing outreach, that's having one-on-ones. I mean, think about, like, if you're a small business owner and you're going to business networking events and you want to generate referrals, what do you have to do? You have to show up to the networking events, you have to work the room, you have to hand out your business cards, you got to follow up and schedule one-on-ones, right? And you have to do weekly one-on-ones, in order to cultivate. Before you might even have to give a referral before you get a referral, right? Like, that's business networking 101. So you got to treat brokers the same way. And if you can do that effectively, when we were at Homewell, we were closing, 1 in 10 leads, like 1 in 10 referrals that we would get from a broker, we would close, so if we could get 100 in a year, that's going to result in 10 deals, right? And I mean, any franchisor that's, maybe their goal is to sell to private equity someday or whatever, they're measuring their net present value of a franchisee. Those contracts are worth a lot of money, right? So go get them, so you have to measure all those things, but you have to make sure you have the bandwidth. So I would recommend, probably like a solid FranDev person, if they're also working web leads for you, can probably handle, 2 brokerage networks, to be able to doing the outreach, attending the events, sitting on the webinars, making the phone calls, to really make hay, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's go back to that for a second, because you're going down a path that I think everyone needs to consider. Especially emerging brands, and this is not meant to be discouragement for emerging brands to work with franchise networks, but if you're working with someone, they say, hey, Mr. Emerging Brand, you need to invest in 5 different franchise broker groups to be successful. But it's just the original founder and CEO doing FranDev, or you got one gal doing FranDev for you, and they're managing the organic leads. They're also trying to manage, they're normally early on, you got multiple hats on, right? So they're also the training and onboarding specialists. Like, you never know, right? So you have to bear in mind that the number of broker groups that you're pulling together, or that you're deciding to enlist in, like, each one requires you to put effort into it. You have to stay in front of the brokers, do your webinars, right? Do the emails that are regular, meet with them one-on-one, like you're saying. Like, just to recap some of the things Brandon's saying, if you don't have the bandwidth to do that, then my recommendation would be don't sign up for that many broker groups. Isolate one that you feel like is best, or maybe 2. It's nice to have a comparison, to have 2 that you work with, but don't sign up for 7 or 5 or even 4.
No, I think that's where a lot of the frustration lies, because franchisors think they can just sign up, they'll have their brand listed in a back office somewhere, and of course, like, they're business owners, they're franchisors, so, like, they're proud of their brand. They think they have the best mac and cheese, they have the best cleaning services, they think they're the next big thing, and hopefully they are, but to just look at it on a static web page or whatever, like, a broker is going to scroll right past you, because sorry, there's 10 other mac and cheese franchises, 40 other senior care brands. You got to find a way to stand out, and the way you do is through personal outreach, right? Like, if, again, these brokers work really hard, they spend their marketing dollars, they're spending $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month to generate leads. Okay, they're talking to candidates, they're putting their reputation out on the line, and they're saying, hey, I'm Brandon Clifford, I understand that you requested information about franchising. Here's what I do. I help you take a step back to understand your goals, your strengths, your weaknesses, your financial capabilities, understand where you are today and where you want to be, and then help you find a vehicle that's going to help you get there. That vehicle is called franchising. I work with lots of different brands, and my goal is to, yes, give you information about the industry that you requested, but however, get you to think outside the box and take a look at 4 or 5 different brands, that maybe you've never even heard of before, because they have 25 locations in New England, but none in Salt Lake, and like, how does that sound good to you? And so this is what they're doing on the front end. They're having them take personality assessments. They're having them fill out a confidential questionnaire, getting a net worth chart, all those sorts of things. This is top brokers, right? This isn't just, passing you a lead, right? If you're asking for leads, we can get you leads, but you're not, that's going to cause frustration. Or the second one is, you sign up for all these broker networks, and then you don't have time to reach out. So you're also not getting that kind of information because the brokers are scrolling right past you and talking to those brands that are doing the outreach, because again, it's like I said, you're cultivating a referral here. Referrals are gold and they're very valuable.
Yeah. And I know you can't call it a partnership, but it really is. It's a type of a partnership where if I have, I have referral partners. I have one referral partner who sent me about, I don't know, 60 deals in the last 50 deals in the last couple of years. You're awesome. And you said something I want to go back to because most people don't think of it like this. But if you want a referral partnership to work, it's kind of like getting a siphon to work, right? You have to get a little bit of something flowing through that partnership channel first, and then it usually takes traction and it will work. Well, what you said is interesting because most franchise development groups don't think of it this way, but I want to highlight an idea here. You tell me if I'm nuts. All right, Brandon. So usually you want to get a referral, you need to give a referral. That's how it works. It's also giver's gain, right? Like you're creating the goodwill, you're creating trust, saying, hey, I know your business enough to give you a decent referral. And then they usually say, okay, I need to reciprocate that. So, but if you as the franchisor are building a relationship with a solid franchise consultant, and you're trying to get that relationship going where they start to send you their top candidates that will perform well in their system, then you have a pile of leads, that are dead, that are not a fit for your brand. They might be a fit for other brands, but they're a fit, but they're not a fit for you. Why on earth? Why don't you just leverage those with your brokers? Like, hey, broker, here's somebody I talked to. Now you have to be careful.
Yeah, so I've heard like that gets thrown around a lot. It's funny, Dave. I've sat on these war room meetings with boards and like, what can we do? What do brokers want? And you're on the right track, right? Brokers want leads, right? Like that's what they want, because it's one thing to throw out some big, huge commission. And I don't know if we could talk about this stuff or whatever, but 100% of the franchise fee, right? There's no, throw out something like that where they're going to get 100%, all 50 grand that's going to the broker group. That means nothing. It means zero if they don't have a candidate that's a right fit for your brand, right? 100% of zero is zero, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So what I did, and this is kind of like, I guess, some secrets or whatever, what always worked well for me was actually we would host webinars, to get brokers to come, like a lot of brokers do, a lot of brands do, to get them to come and learn about your brand. It's a good way to, say you get 25, 30 brokers on a webinar. Now you can do the outreach afterwards to those 25 or 30 that showed at least a little bit of interest in your brand, as opposed to going down the Rolodex of 200 brokers or whatever's in the network, right? So you whet their appetite, invite them to a webinar, say 30 show up. And what we used to do to get more to register and more to come, if you were in attendance at the webinar, we would spin a wheel, all right? And whoever's name it landed on, we would give them $1,000. Sometimes 500, usually 1,000 towards leads. Okay. So whoever their lead provider was, if it was a portal, we give it to we literally set a call with that portal. We'd say $1,000. Here's our credit card. It's going to this broker. If they did Facebook ads, we'd say, okay, like, let us talk to your social media strategist. We'll give them $1,000 and they can spend. We wanted it to go to lead gen, and the goal was that was going to then hopefully come as a referral to us. Did it always? Not necessarily, but it got 35 brokers to that webinar, and even if the broker didn't end up sending us a deal, one of those other 35 probably did, right? So thinking outside the box like that in ways that you are, and I know you're saying like giving dead leads, that could be a potential way as well. But yeah, try to just think of a way that you can give something before you just get, right? You can't expect someone to give you a referral unless you're doing something that's going to benefit them.
Yeah, I do want to put a big asterisk on my thought that I threw out down just for a second, because you can't just pass customer data around anymore. Probably shouldn't have anyway. But if you have, let's say, a list of 1,000 people that were interested in your brand at some point or franchising and filled out a lead form, and they're dead though now. You need to reach out to them first and be like, hey, by the way, I've got a partner. I've got partners that are interested in helping you find the right.
That's an interesting thought. I mean, for a franchisor to do their own drip campaign that is hopefully you're working your database and have a little footer at the bottom like, hey, I'm no longer interested in your brand, but I would love to talk to a consultant about other franchises, and you can pass that to your consultant partners. That'd be amazing.
I mean, why not do it? Why not do it? I mean, but I mean, you know exactly.
That's a way to filter your database too. And I know obviously ClientTether, now you can get that person out of your database completely, right? And move it over to someone else. That's actually interesting.
Yeah. Anyway,
Like,
that's another
getting off
conversation
topic there.
probably for another day. No, but it's to your point of like, if I'm trying to build a partnership with a franchise consultant, with a broker,
Yeah. Well, and
then
also like it's keeping in mind, like furthermore, the person who really matters in the equation, which is the franchisee, right?
Mhm.
Like the
Yeah.
potential business owner. You're not just continuing to try to shove your brand down their throat if they're no longer a fit. You're giving this person who, because first and foremost, people get into franchising because we want to inspire people to become entrepreneurs. We want to give them the ability to become an entrepreneur without being entrepreneurial, right? Like that's what franchising is really all about.
Yeah.
They can be a business owner without coming up with the idea and the business and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like you're continuing to lead with that, and I think that's when franchising really wins. When brands don't see each other as competition, when even brokers don't see each other as competition, but really, we're an industry that just, it's like this powerhouse when we get together to inspire people to bet on themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. More people need to.
Mhm.
Let's talk for a second. So because you've been on both sides and now you're currently like, coaching, mentoring, helping brokers succeed and building those partnerships with franchisors,
Mhm.
help a franchisor get inside the head of a broker. Like what are probably the 2 or 3 most important things to that broker that will
Mhm.
inspire them to want to get engaged with your brand and find candidates and promote that your brand among candidates? Because they have a
Mhm.
Rolodex, right? No matter which group they're in,
Sure.
they've got options. If it's pizza, they've got 7. If it's home cleaning, they got 4. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
matter which group. There are always options in categories. So the question is, how do you become a category option number 1 in the head
Mhm.
of a broker? Can you help us with that a little bit, Brandon?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, you have to be consistent with your outreach, but respectful. And what I mean by that is like, don't be spamming, just sending the same email that you send to candidates to your broker refer. Like that's not going to work. They're not looking to buy a franchise. Okay. So don't try to sell your franchise to your consultant referral partners, right? Like that's a big mistake. All right. And then the second thing though is, and this might sound a little, I guess counterintuitive because I just said don't try to sell them the franchise, but invite them into your sales process. And what I mean by that is allow the brokers to journey alongside the candidates when they send they send you a referral. Even encourage them, okay? Because a lot of brokers they understand that it's sort of like their reputation on the line. They don't want to be that guy or that gal that sends you a bad fit. They don't want to send you a referral that is a no-show for the initial call or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So they sometimes that's to the detriment of the franchise consultant, and then they almost create this analysis by paralysis to the candidate, and then they don't end up making the referral because they're worried about like this candidate not showing up on the initial call, and then it ruins their reputation. Break down that wall for the
Mhm.
broker and say, hey, Dave, I like you. We've had 3 conversations. You understand who our ideal candidate is. I understand that right now you probably don't have anyone in your pipeline that's like the perfect fit for my brand. But what I would love you to do is, think of someone who may be interested, even if it's just a tire kicker who's not qualified financially, that can come along and learn. So, and you schedule an initial call for me and your candidate, and I want you to come on it as well. All right,
Mhm.
allow them to see you work. Right, sit on your calls. Hear the pitch, understand the brand better, and invite them to all of them, the entire process. Who knows, you might get a deal out of that, right? Because they'll send you someone that maybe they didn't know was the right fit that ends up becoming a good fit. At the very least, they now, the next one they send you will be a much better fit. So break down that wall, make sure they understand that like it doesn't have to be a perfect fit every single time. It's more that you're going to close 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 or 1 in 20. So send me 20 so we can close 1. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And you said
Mhm.
something, and I want to come back and highlight it too, is
Mhm.
part of that process, right? This nurturing process with a broker is
Mhm.
also about educating, right? Because you don't just want every rando referral of a lead that they could possibly send you. That's a waste
Mhm.
of their time and your time, and it erodes the relationship. Any
Mhm.
consultants that are listening, if you're just like spraying and praying leads out to a bunch of brands, stop. Like it's
Mhm.
counterproductive, and they're not going to want to work. Like every time they get one of your leads, they groan. So
Mhm.
like, be selective, be educated, be deliberate with what you do here, both on the
Mhm.
franchise or franchise broker side. But by providing that education, sometimes brokers are left with no choice because they have a single, very short one pager about the brand with a couple of bullets, and your FranDev sites don't have enough information to educate the brokers or the candidates. And so they're like, well, they sort of like this category, so I guess I'll just pitch it over the fence. Like, so don't leave them in that situation. Educate them with these trips that you send. Make sure they're valuable.
Yeah, and then you make sure you're creating content for your listing pages that are broker facing first and foremost. You know, so it's like how to introduce our brand. You know, here's an example. Maybe record a 90-second video of yourself pitching the brand in 90 seconds, right? Like as if you're pitching it to a candidate. You know, from a broker's perspective, though. You know what I mean? Like if I was getting a candidate excited about myself versus 2 other home care brands or whatever it might be, you know, like create something like that that's broker facing. And then also the other thing you can do is make sure you also arm the brokers with collateral that they can then give to the candidates that won't simply redirect them to your website, you know, because the brokers want to share information. They want to give, you know, your content out, but they also want to protect their leads, right? They want to protect, you know. So yeah, I mean, like I remember when I was at Homewell, you know, I talked to the marketing department, and we would always have separate collateral, you know, for broker collateral and candidate collateral, and then there would always be a pocket in the broker collateral. And I said, just assume everything we send our candidates, or we send our brokers, they're going to send to a candidate, you know. So we don't want to put like $30,000 commission on the bottom of a flyer, right? Like the broker knows what the commission is. They get a commission sheet every single week from the network. They can go in their back office. They can see what we don't need to put that on the PDF that we know that they want to share with the candidate, you know, because all we're doing now is we're making them have to go in and like delete that and alter it and do all these things, you know. Just give them something that they can share. You know, if it's something about the business model, make sure they can share it with the candidate.
Yep. I love it. It's good advice. And because a lot of people are like, no, I want to highlight our awesome commission structure. So they splatter it all over everything, and then their collateral is useless, which is
because ultimately, I mean, I know obviously the reason why brokers get into this business is because it can be lucrative, high commissions, low overhead. Awesome. You know, however, that's not why a broker sends you a referral. That's not why. They send you the referral because they really believe this is going to be a great franchisee for you. And they really believe you're going to be a great franchisor for that candidate. You know, that's why they do it. You know, so yeah, I mean, the commissions are important. They're good. They're huge. You know, like they're hugely important. But there's enough places for them to understand that it doesn't have to be on every flyer.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for that insight, Brandon. I know as we're wrapping up, I want to pick your brain about a really important part of this discussion, which is what does a brand need to make sure they do so they're ready to work with brokers? And if they're not ready, what do they need to be doing? And actually, and as you answer that question, can you also say, here's somebody who's not ready to work with brokers as a franchise brand?
Yeah, because it is definitely I think kind of misleading a lot of times, and I'm not going to throw anyone in particular into the bus, but a lot of times like the franchise development companies, like that's a piece of their advice. They'll give these brands, sign up with every broker group, right? Just sign up with broker group. But like a franchise consultant, you know, again, like they're kind of like their reputation on sending the referral to you is on the line, but also with the candidate, right? And we found our sweet spot, you know, for brands that do the most deals, so to speak, on an annual year with BAI are in that like, you know, 20 to 50 range. Okay, so they're like established. They have, you know, 10, 15, 20, you know, 20, 15 and up locations, so that there's there's good validation, there's brand history, you know, things like that. But then there's still a lot of territory available. Okay, like if you're over 300 locations, you know, I mean, well, whereas like it just gets a little bit of a different conversation because maybe now you're looking at resales, you're looking at, you know, there's just different things you can do with brokers at that point. But if you're under 15 units, or you're not selling in all 50 states, I would closely look at my broker strategy. Maybe I would only work with one broker group, you know, not 5. Even a pocket of that broker group. That's actually something we do as well at BA. We talk about that and we're like, hey, so we love your brand. We love your business model. It seems great. You got 2 locations. There's no validation. So if I was a broker, I'd have a hard time sending you a referral because I'd be worried unless you find that unicorn, that super pioneer, you know, candidate that wants to be an early mover on a brand. there's not a lot of those out there, right? So sometimes we'll pair them with a handful of brokers, just 3 or 4 to try to get those, 5, 6, 7 under your belt, get them open, and I mean, I think that you can try to accelerate that in some ways. So this is kind of not necessarily working with brokers, but thinking outside the box for your FranDev strategy. If you are a brand new brand, you're less than 10 units, less than 5 units or whatever, great place to look for those first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your existing customers. Right. Look at who your best customer is. Obviously your employees, that's a good way to kind of, get out of the box, so to speak. But it's a little bit of a long haul at the beginning, but once you get to that point of critical mass, whether it's 10 units or 15 units, then it is time to probably, spread your wings, but focus regionally at the beginning and then go nationwide with a broker group.
Yeah, no, that's a smart one because you can't work with broker groups and keep it sort of small and very tactical. That's a really smart idea. And I love that advice about, early on, harvest what you got, work with your customers, work with your employees. I know a lot of brands that's been their number one franchise. And it's also been one that worked very well because they were already trained up in the franchise before they took it over. So their validation early on was very good. That's a critical part of this. So I thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because when you get into the broker space, you do lose an element of control, right? And it's like if you don't understand who your ideal candidate or who your ideal, franchisee is, which there's no way to know that, you might hypothetically think former police officers would be a great franchisee for me, right? And so you go out and you market for police officers, and then you get 2, 3, 4, great, but if you go into a broker group, all of a sudden you're getting referrals that are police officers, teachers, firefighters, military veterans, and former IT executives, right? And they're all financially qualified, so you sign them all up, right? Now all of a sudden you have 5 different people that you have to build a training program for a teacher, a police officer, a former tech guy, and a firefighter. Like those are all vastly different backgrounds, right? So like, I think before you lose that control, it is important to have your own systems and processes in place, so you don't fall flat operationally, because that can obviously spell disaster for franchisors as well.
Yeah, well, The Last Airbender, the Avatar, is coming out in February with a new series. So, but it makes me think of how important your avatar is. Being a little cheeky, like you just have to. A lot of these early brands I've noticed, they don't really know. Like they just tell me demographics of like, oh, who's your candidate? And they tell me, net worth and liquid cap. I'm like, no. That doesn't describe anybody. That just describes somebody's financial portfolio. But who is this person? Like who runs?
Yeah, and I mean, early on, you want to probably model that after the founder, right? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Find people like you, and do that for the first 3, and then reassess, and then say, okay, so now you can now go out of those 3 people. It's kind of like, genetics, right? Like, brown eyes will dominate like blue eyes or whatever. So you have like kind of your family tree that goes along. And as you continue to grow out, you can kind of loosen the reins, so to speak, because you don't necessarily need people who are just like the founder anymore in order for that. And that's how you build like a long-term healthy franchise ecosystem, where you're spitting off royalties, because otherwise, if you're just scattershot and all over the place and there's nothing cohesive, I mean, when you have your annual conference, you want, the reason why people join a franchise is because they want to be a part of something that's like bigger than themselves. They all want to wear the same jersey, right? So they have to identify with certain things, like brand pillars or culture or whatever, and if you have these people from all these different backgrounds, that just doesn't work. Now, once you get to 200 locations, then you can have different sets of, lots of, and that's a nice place to be, but it takes time to get there.
Yeah, agreed. Well, this has been fantastic, Brandon. I think you and I could go for another hour just breaking this down, but key things that I've taken away from this today are make sure that you got a proper engagement model and you have proper staffing to engage broker groups. Make sure that you have the right validation, the right makeup to succeed with broker groups. You've sold too many territories. If you're going to engage broker groups, you got to be very tactical and only work with people that maybe specialize in resells or people in regions where you're kind of soft. And then make sure that you are you create this collateral and these resources that brokers can use that are independently available for them to share with candidates, not just things that have commission rates splattered all over them. Brandon, anything else? What would you highlight as a couple of other things people really ought to, if they didn't get anything else, they ought to get this out of this episode today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I probably sound like a broken record, but I think changing your language, because what you say really matters, and stop looking for broker leads, start looking for referrals.
Yeah, love it. That's actually a great way to encapsulate it. Brandon, you've been awesome. Thanks again, my friend, for joining us. And everybody, Brandon Clifford, you can find him on LinkedIn. You can find him at BAI's website. If you want to reach out to him directly, he's a great guy. I'm sure he'd be happy to give you some advice.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Brandon.